Meghan Markle thought she could control the narrative, as she always does. But one courtroom moment shattered her carefully curated image. It was supposed to be another ordinary hearing, just another legal hurdle. Meghan's team strutted in with their trademark confidence, polished, rehearsed, and ready to dominate. The plan? Get the judge to toss the case out before it reached the trial phase. Simple, right? But what happened next? Nothing short of a public disintegration. Judge William Pryor wasn't there for pleasantries. He didn't waste time with niceties. No, he went straight for the jugular, dissecting each and every claim Meghan's high-priced legal team had made. There was no hesitation, no drawn-out battle, just a methodical breakdown that would leave everyone feeling exposed. What seemed like a well-thought-out defense started to look suspiciously flimsy. In a matter of minutes, Meghan's so-called rock-solid legal strategy was unraveling. The observers stopped scribbling, their pens paused midair. Even the reporters leaned in, sensing the shift in the room. Opposing counsel exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and amusement. Meghan's legal team, once heralded as untouchable, was visibly shaken. Their confidence, usually their greatest weapon, was now a liability. Notes were shuffled nervously, microphones were adjusted, and hands fidgeted in anxiety. This wasn't chaos. No, it was something worse, a slow, quiet collapse. And then came the crushing moment, the blow that echoed beyond the courtroom. Samantha Markle's attorney, cool and collected, threw out a line that would live on in infamy. Meghan's defense, he said, was nothing more than a smorgasbord of excuses. That single sentence turned Meghan's entire defense into a punchline, a metaphor that worked far too well. Suddenly, the whole courtroom understood. The once feared legal team was reduced to a collection of half-baked deflections. It was an image that stuck, and the moment that Meghan's team had feared became the joke of the day. It wasn't just the legal defense that collapsed in that instant. It was the illusion of Meghan's invincibility. As her lawyers stumbled, Meghan was nowhere to be found. The self-proclaimed perfectionist who micromanaged every detail of her image was conspicuously absent. While her case crumbled, she was miles away, silent. Her silence, however, spoke volumes. Within hours, the courtroom drama spread like wildfire. TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, every platform buzzed with mocking parodies of Meghan's legal failings. Memes flooded the internet, reenactments of the courtroom scene went viral, and smorgasbord of excuses became a catchphrase that no one could forget. Meghan, the media-savvy Duchess, didn't have a response. No tweet, no statement, no spin. Instead, she let the internet take control of the narrative, and it wasn't kind. Behind the scenes, chaos was unfolding. Panic set in. Emergency meetings were called. PR firms were frantically dialed in. Reports suggested that Prince Harry was pacing in their Montecito home, trying to figure out how this disaster had spiraled so far out of their control. The carefully constructed brand that Meghan had built, one of resilience, empowerment, and untouchable glamour, was bleeding out in real time, not because of a single scandal, but from the slow erosion of her credibility. But that wasn't the worst part. Because in that courtroom, the story of Meghan Markle was also being rewritten. For years, Meghan had crafted a narrative for herself, one of the lonely, self-made girl who overcame every obstacle, built her own empire, and rose to royalty without any help. The narrative of an only child, isolated and self-sufficient, was her public identity. It was powerful. It justified her mistrust of the royal family. It explained her independence, her resilience, and even made her more attractive to Prince Harry. She wasn't just the woman who caught his eye, she was the one who didn't need anyone. But the defamation case filed by Samantha Markle was now threatening that very narrative. It wasn't just about name-calling, it was about exposing the truth. Samantha's lawsuit claimed that Meghan had deliberately erased her siblings from her life story. The lawsuit painted a picture of a family that, contrary to Meghan's claims, had been a part of her life for years. Family events, shared memories, none of that fit the isolated image Meghan had presented to the world. This wasn't just a courtroom battle, it was an all-out assault on Meghan's identity. The stakes were no longer just legal, they were personal, moral, and reputational. And it wasn't just about Samantha's claims. It raised the question, if Meghan could bend the truth about something as intimate as her childhood, what else had she distorted or hidden from the world? The press, the biographers, the insiders, all of them began connecting the dots. The stories from palace aides, the rumors of Meghan's rude behavior towards staff, the infamous bridesmaid dress debacle with Kate Middleton, all started to look less like isolated drama and more like a pattern. A pattern of a woman who had built an image not just on the truth but on carefully curated half-truth and omissions. The myth of Meghan Markle was being dismantled piece by piece. And the courtroom was where it all started. Even the palace, which had stayed largely silent on Meghan's narrative up until now, was quietly nodding in agreement. They always knew that Meghan's version of events didn't quite add up, but they'd never pushed back publicly. Now, they didn't have to say a word. The courtroom had done it for them, but the fallout wasn't just about gossip, it was about business. Executives, those who signed the big deals, were now asking hard questions. Is this brand still viable? Is it still worth the risk? For years, Meghan operated with the belief that her fame and PR would shield her from the consequences of anything that went wrong. But fame doesn't protect you when the cracks start to show. And when those cracks shatter, they do so loudly. The Netflix glow that once seemed eternal began to dim. The Spotify deal, already a thing of the past. The book sales, a distant memory. Hollywood, the real Hollywood, wasn't interested in the damaged goods Meghan had become. They wanted stability, they wanted momentum, and they wanted assets they could rely on. Meghan's brand, once seen as polished and global, now appeared volatile. Her ability to control the story had been her greatest weapon, but now that weapon had backfired. The courtroom disaster had set the stage for a PR nightmare that no one could predict. This was the moment Meghan Markle's story began to slip away from her. And the worst part, she didn't even know how to get it back. The ripple effects of Meghan's courtroom collapse were immediate and undeniable. What had once been a brand built on the allure of royalty, self-reliance, and overcoming adversity now seemed fragile and hollow. As the press and public began to dissect her actions, whether it was the perceived mistreatment of her family, the questionable handling of her royal duties, or the unraveling of her carefully constructed narrative, it was becoming clear. Meghan Markle's empire wasn't just crumbling, it was crumbling in public, and there was no way to stop the tide. Behind the closed doors of her private life, panic spread like wildfire. There were emergency meetings, frantic calls to PR teams, and even reports of Prince Harry pacing through their Methodical mansion, completely lost on how they had gone from darlings of the royal family to the subject of ridicule. Every strategy that had once worked for Meghan, every carefully curated Instagram post, every perfectly timed public appearance seemed pointless now. The public was no longer buying into the fairy tale. Instead, they wanted receipts. And it wasn't just the legal battle that had started to unravel Meghan's image. It was the sheer gravity of her silence. While the courtroom drama raged on and memes flooded the internet, Meghan's response was non-existent. No statement, no apology, no strategic comeback. In fact, it was as though she disappeared entirely, leaving the world to wonder if she was even watching as the whole thing spiraled out of control. The silence was deafening. And in the age of social media, silence is never golden. It's suspicious. The internet, ever hungry for drama and controversy, began spinning their own narratives. The viral phrases, the mockery of her defense, the courtroom mishaps, each new detail further eroded any sympathy people had for her. The only thing louder than the memes and parodies was the silence of Meghan and her camp. But the consequences didn't end there. The courtroom drama not only shook her personal image, but also cast a dark shadow over her professional career. The deals, once so lucrative, began to dry up. Netflix, who had been all too eager to sign Meghan up for a docuseries, began quietly distancing themselves. The Spotify partnership, which had been a lucrative venture, suddenly seemed like a lost cause. No one was interested in creating content for a brand so volatile, so uncertain. Hollywood, too, turned its back on her. Meghan had gone from being an untouchable global figure to an unpredictable liability. And let's not forget the financial consequences. Meghan and Harry had once positioned themselves as financial powerhouses. But with every story that hit the headlines, their value as public figures began to plummet. They had gambled everything on their brand, and now it was all crashing down. But perhaps the most devastating blow was the unraveling of Meghan's own narrative. For years, she had played the victim card to perfection. She had positioned herself as the underdog, the girl who came from humble beginnings and rose above the toxicity of her family, the royals, and even the press. Her story was one of perseverance and strength, of overcoming obstacles that no one could even begin to understand. But now, with the world pulling back the curtains on her carefully sculpted image, the truth was starting to emerge. The defamation lawsuit filed by Samantha Markle had opened a door to a past that Meghan had long ago tried to close. For years, Meghan had painted herself as an only child, isolated from her family and the toxicity of their existence. But now, Samantha's lawsuit was claiming that this narrative was nothing more than a lie. Meghan had erased her siblings from her story, selectively chosen to deny their existence in the public eye, all for the sake of building a narrative of independence. It wasn't just a legal fight, it was an attack on the very core of who Meghan had claimed to be. This was no longer a case about a lawsuit, it was about the authenticity of the woman behind the public image. The once glamorous Duchess, who had tried to sell herself as an empowered figure, was now the subject of ridicule and scorn. The press dug deeper, and the story started to evolve into something far more significant. A tale of a woman who manipulated her past to make her present seem perfect. What had once been a carefully curated narrative now appeared to be an intricate web of lies, omissions, and convenient truths. And as the courtroom proceedings continued to unfold, the cracks in Meghan's facade only deepened. Her legal team, which had once seemed invincible, had been shredded in front of the world. The metaphor of the smorgasbord of excuses had encapsulated everything that was wrong with her defense. Every argument they had put forward, every claim of innocence, now seemed desperate and half-baked. But it wasn't just the courtroom that exposed her weaknesses, it was the world outside it, the public's growing cynicism, and the media frenzy that now viewed Meghan through a lens of suspicion rather than admiration. The damage was irreversible. Meghan had once been the one to control her narrative. She had the power to shape how the world saw her. But now, she was watching as her story was rewritten, not by her own hand, but by the very people she had once sought to manipulate. Her brand, once untouchable, was now in freefall. And the worst part, it wasn't just about her legal battle. It was about her very identity. Meghan Markle's power had always been in her ability to frame the narrative, but that power had slipped through her fingers, leaving her exposed, vulnerable, and struggling to regain control. The public had taken the pen, and Meghan Markle's once perfect fairy tale was now a cautionary tale. The world was watching, and they weren't interested in Meghan's spin. They wanted the truth. But unfortunately for her, the truth had already been exposed in that federal courtroom, and now there was no going back. The once untouchable Meghan Markle had lost it big time, and the repercussions were far-reaching. The courtroom drama that had started with a quiet hearing had turned into a public spectacle. The lawsuit, which was supposed to be dismissed in a whisper, became the most talked-about case in the media. Every move Meghan made, every word spoken by her defense team was dissected by the public, and every misstep was amplified by the internet. What had started as a simple legal battle had evolved into a viral storm that Meghan couldn't control, no matter how hard she tried. Her silence, her absence, only made things worse. The internet took the narrative and ran with it, spinning it into a story that Meghan could no longer contain. The once pristine image of the Duchess of Sussex had been shattered in the blink of an eye, and the world was now watching as her brand slowly crumbled before their eyes.